I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Welcome to a new year of the Roots and All podcast. I hope you had a lovely Christmas and a very happy new year to you. As you may have gathered by now, I'm keen to explore the idea of vegan gardening, so I'm celebrating Veganuary here on the podcast by dedicating the 3 January episodes to it. Vegan gardening is an important thing for me to talk about because it's what I know and it's where I can effect change. When I see people debating veganism, they often escalate the argument to a macro level and how veganism will affect farming if the whole world turns vegan. People on both sides of the argument will bandy around big numbers relating to how much land we need to grow enough plants for everyone to eat, how grass-fed meat is better for us and the planet, etc., etc. And the bottom line is, we don't know what would happen if everyone turned vegan overnight, but it doesn't really matter because they won't. Any move away from eating meat will be a slow and gradual shift, giving everyone involved in food production ample time to adjust. And quite honestly, anybody who asked me how I propose to feed the world on a vegan diet is asking the wrong question because it's not my problem. I'm not a farmer. I'm a gardener. I grow plants in my home and in my garden, and I help other people grow plants in their homes and gardens, and this is my sphere of influence. If you're vegan or vegetarian, you probably won't want to use animal products in your garden. And if you're not, you may still not want to use animal products in your garden. I'm going to say something a bit controversial now that won't sit well with some hardline vegans probably, but I believe you can eat meat and still be concerned about animal welfare and be an animal lover. So you might choose meat products that come with the RSPCA Welfare Standards stamp of approval, and you wouldn't like to think that the products you put on your garden are the byproducts of intensively farmed chickens that are kept in horrific conditions, for instance. In an ideal world, I'd like to see us using no animal products anywhere, but this ain't an ideal world, and we need to make little changes and use as few animal products as possible where we don't need to be using them. And gardening is one of those areas where we definitely don't need to be using them. So if you're interested in gardening, you're probably already aware of Cleve West. Cleve is a garden designer who's been working for decades producing some of the most thoughtful and beautiful gardens to have graced both the public and private realms. He's probably best known for his 2011 book, Our Plot, which is a diary and memoir of the allotment he keeps with his partner Christine. And he also consistently produces top-class show gardens that have seen him win multiple medals and the coveted Best in Show award at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show 2 years on the bounce. I've seen him described as the quiet man of the gardening world, so if you're not aware of his work, it's probably because he's always minded his own business a little bit and got on with the job of honing his craft with little drama. Which is why he created a bit of a stir amongst his fans and the industry in general when he began posting pretty hard-hitting vegan messages on his social media accounts. Cleve's book, Our Plot, shows that gardening with a no-kill policy and with wildlife in mind has always been a determining factor in his gardening style, and I started by asking him about this. So I did read your book, and I thought what came through for me was that you've always gardened with an attitude that respects life and makes it difficult for you to kill things. Where do you think that came from?
I think that definitely came from my partner Christine. Her family are animal lovers and they taught me a lot about being more compassionate to things. So I had a sort of checkered childhood. I was a horrible little boy to insects and things like that. It fell into place at the same sort of time that I met Jeff Hamilton as well, and he was gardening organically. He saw my garden at the Hampton Court Flower Show and really liked it. Actually, after a dodgy start, because he came in saying, this isn't an organic garden. I labelled it as an organic garden. He said, this isn't organic. You've got tropical hardwood in your garden. And I said, no, it's not, Jeff. It's reclaimed elm. It's just been burnt to look like ebony or something. And he was so relieved. He said, oh, thank God for that. I was about to slate it. And he gave it a good report. But, his way of gardening up at Barnsdale, I used to watch Gardener's World avidly and learn a lot about the organic techniques he used. And that sort of struck a chord with me. And then meeting Christine at the same time, it all sort of fused together. I think that's where it came from.
And the vegetarianism started around that time as well?
Yeah, around that sort of time. It happened by accident, really. I got ill with gallstones and I actually passed them somehow. And it's really painful. And the doctor friend of mine said I should consider a vegetarian diet because our family are from India, Anglo-Indian family, so we used to eat a lot of animal stuff, a lot of animal fats and dairy and sweets, sugar, so all the wrong things, you know. So it's no wonder I got this gallstone trouble. So I tried a vegetarian diet and I'd already passed the stones, which was the painful bit. But then after that, going vegetarian just felt a whole lot better. Still ate cheese and eggs and milk and stuff. So it was a long time before I became vegan. But going vegetarian then was more for health reasons than for any compassionate reasons.
And then when did you make the change to being vegan?
That was 3.5 years ago. In a funny sort of way, we were already close to being vegan. We'd sort of cut down on, again, for health reasons, on dairy and eggs and stuff. There were already 3 vegans in the family. My stepdaughter, Christine's daughter, Joanna, and her 2 boys are all vegan. And then another grandson from her other daughter, Stephanie, he decided to go vegan at the age of 12. And that sort of brought us all up with a start. I thought, well, he's obviously given it a lot of thought. So some of the family decided to go vegan to support him. And then Christine and I thought about it and we thought, yeah, give it a try. Again, not for compassionate reasons. It just seemed to be, you know, for health. And I mean, we were obviously mindful of animals. So, yeah, that's what forced us in that direction. But I say forced, it wasn't a forcing thing at all.
You seem to have done it for health reasons, which is a lot of, I think, people's motivation. Did you come to the animal rights part of it or after turning vegan? Yeah.
So I became vegan and it was actually easier than I thought it was going to be. I didn't miss eggs, didn't miss cheese, didn't miss butter at all. So what happened was that I was sent some links to watch. The film called Earthlings. There's also another one called Cowspiracy and Forks Over Knives. That was the other film. But I watched Earthlings, which is from the animal's point of view, and that freaked me out completely. I just couldn't cope with it. There's so much violence. It actually did me in for about a month or 2. I couldn't function very well, which is a bit strange. It was the first time I'd actually considered it from the animal's point of view, so it was quite a shock. And I think if a lot of people do end up becoming active after seeing that sort of footage, but most of us don't want to see it. That's the real issue.
I know. Well, I don't watch it. I can't.
No.
You know, I'm not brave enough. But,
no. But you know, have you seen any of it at all? No,
I just went vegan without. I see enough things pop up on my social media to horrify me.
Yeah,
I just can't face anymore. I'm just not strong enough. I know you face it head on. And
I know it can. If you're not careful, it can really mess you up. But I see it. I don't see it as regularly as I used to because I'm mindful of my mental health. Because it did actually affect me quite badly. I personally need to see some of it sometimes just to keep me fueled in terms of the activism, because it's easy to just push it away and sweep under the carpet and pretend it's not happening. But it's happening every second of every single day. You know, millions and millions, billions of animals being killed needlessly. So it's quite a tricky subject, and people really don't want to see it and actually think ill of you if you try and suggest that they do watch these things. And the reaction on social media is quite interesting as well. But lately, though, people have, when I first started sending this stuff out, people, I think, thought I'd gone mad. Well, I had gone mad in a funny sort of way. Now I'm getting a lot more positive feedback, people who have actually made the attempt to watch some of this themselves and say, well, he's not mad after all. It's like, this is really going on and it should be stopped. Even after that Hortus Loci lecture, I went to an animal slaughterhouse yesterday as a protest, and I heard through someone else that one of the members of the audience at that Hortus Loci lecture actually went to their first vigil that the Guildford saved the other day. So that was great. That's a good result.
Yeah.
And he's a landscaper, so that's good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think when you started tweeting stuff out, I was already vegetarian, tipping towards veganism. And I suppose I was quite shocked because I think your career and your personal beliefs were always separate in a way. It's quite difficult to go on social media as your professional self and then speak out about something that's really your personal beliefs. And that's what I think a lot of people find difficult. You can quietly be vegan, but when it rubs up against your professional life, that's when you're more vulnerable, or you feel vulnerable. Have you had any backlash, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of people question the wisdom of doing this, sort of coming out, as it were. But it's my brother I've got to thank. You know, I was in a quandary about how to go about daily work, and then also trying to promote animal rights. And he said, don't be ashamed of it. It's something noble you should do. And the truth has to come out. He's vegan, by the way. And he said, just be honest about it. There's no point in trying to divorce the two and try and live a false life. Just be honest about it, and people can take it or leave it. And a lot of people have left it, and some people I don't speak to very much these days. But equally, some people have embraced it, and I've met a lot of new people as well. But the thing that's made me do it more than anything else is the fact, if it had just been about animal rights, I would have still protested about it. But because it links so strongly with the environment and health issues, you could go vegan for any one of three reasons. 1, for the animals, 2, for the environment, 3, for personal health. When you've got all three of those really important issues together, it's just a no-brainer for me. So with the environment and health reasons on top of everything else, you know, I've got to keep speaking up about it. And I don't care if I don't work again. You know, in fact, it would give me more time to do activism, to be quite honest, because that's the tricky part, is finding the time to do the activism in between work.
I think everyone's got their Achilles heel. For some people, it is the financial side. For some people, they don't like to feel that they're going to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
But it is something, I think that it's so intertwined probably with what we do as a career, that you can't really be off of bringing it to your professional work. So does it feed into your design work? Are you deliberately kind of avoiding work where you think that it's going to compromise your beliefs?
That's a good question, actually. Lately, I've been sort of with various projects. If there's something where there's a lot of disruption for no good reason, then I probably will either try and put them off doing that or walk away from the job. I prefer to try and work with people and try and steer them in the right direction. I haven't really had a good, strong example of that just yet, because every job you do involves some sort of disruption in the landscape industry. But lately, I'm thinking more along the lines of trying to... I like this idea of nature taking back over, and at our allotment, for an example, we've always been mindful of the limited time we have down there. I get my knickers in the right old twist about the amount of weeds growing up, but since becoming vegan, I'm not so worried about it anymore. I can see the value of weeds, and I can see the value of the wildlife inhabiting those weeds. And I mean, it doesn't mean to say that everything's fine and rosy down there. I still get bit flustered if we can't grow things as well as we could normally. But there is a change going on in my brain about how we manage land, and wild spaces are just as good as cultivated spaces. So how that's going to affect work is going to depend on the clients I get, basically. If I get a client that really wants something really neat and tidy, it's probably not going to be so good for me in terms of being able to express myself. But there are lots of interesting dilemmas creeping up. I can't give you an honest answer of how I'm going to navigate them. I think it's going to be on the spur of the moment thing, and trying to find clients that are like-minded. The last couple of years, I've had some really good clients and very sympathetic to vegan issues. Not that I actually go in there storming with vegan badges and propaganda right from the word go, but people do sort of pick up on the fact that I'm vegan through either social media or through what someone else has said, and they might start asking questions. And I've had some really good conversations with people. Many people open to it, and you know, there's probably about 3 clients I know who I think will be vegan. They don't know who they are yet. I'm sure they will at some point, because they're really sensitive people, sensitive to the environment. They've got all the values that I've got. It's just taking that final step and looking into that black pit of horror, which no one wants to take the lid off. But I suppose one of the main reasons why I really am quite vocal about veganism in the gardening world is that I think gardeners should be at the vanguard of this movement, seeing as it affects the environment so much. You know, with all the emissions that exceed all transportation just from animal agriculture and all the deforestation that takes place, the species that are lost, the ocean depletion, all that and more, even affecting people in terms of starvation and world hunger. If all the gardeners sort of got together and saw the reality of all this and the environmental damage, then I'm sure most of them, or a lot of them, would be more open-minded about the vegan. Are your taste buds worth more than all this environmental destruction, plus all the animals' lives, plus your personal health? Is taste that important? That's the question I'm really trying to ask people.
Yes, and that's actually the most difficult question, because it boils down to, is your own personal desire to feed your stomach more important than animals' lives, which is basically the crux of it. I think that's why so many people don't want to think about that, because it does just boil down to that.
Yeah, and also, it's not just you, it comes down to your offspring as well, to your grandchildren. Your personal taste, does that outweigh the future of your grandchildren and what sort of world we're going to live in? Because it will affect it. And I think most people think they're going to lose something. I know when I started thinking about being vegan, I thought, well, I'm going to miss this, I'm going to have to give up that. And it's all, the emphasis is always about what I'm going to have to give up. And I think what people have to try and understand is that, first of all, you don't give up anything. What you give up is, you stop taking what isn't yours to start with, another being's life. That's one way of looking at it. You think you're going to give up a lot of things, and really it's so easy. If I'd known how easy it was, I would have done it a million years ago,
Yeah, same. Although, that said, it wasn't as easy. I did try about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's much easier now than it was then.
For sure, yeah.
And it's much easier, even more so than it was 20 years ago when people were doing it.
Well, yeah, exactly, definitely. So if people can get over the fact that they're going to miss anything, because you won't, all the tastes that you're used to now and the textures are replicated in the vegan versions. So you don't actually miss anything. You just cut out all the violence.
Yeah. The only thing I think I would say is it takes more time, I think.
To begin with, I think there is a little bit of a learning curve to begin with. Certainly saves time in the supermarket. You can cut out about 2/3 of the supermarket. Yeah. But in terms of preparation and learning recipes, and I think there is a little bit of a learning curve, but not excessive. It was a real education to me. It's opened up a whole new world, new tastes. I mean, I've had a really good upbringing in terms of taste. My Anglo-Indian heritage meant that I was eating garlic before Elizabeth David was promoting it in the 60s, And so we had a great range of a great variety of tastes. But even since then, my repertoire for cooking has expanded in all sorts of directions, eating vegetables and fruit that I hadn't eaten before. And it's only because I'd never been that adventurous with it.
I think my friend summed it up. She went vegan for a while and she said, I fell in love with cooking again.
Yeah.
And I went to the supermarket and I was genuinely excited for the first time in years to be in the shop and in the spices aisle and things. Because I just thought, wow, I can be really creative. And it made me feel so excited about food, whereas I'd just seen it as something to... That's
right. Have you got the BOSH book?
No, I haven't yet. No.
Well, the BOSH book is really good for anyone who thinks they might struggle with being vegan. BOSH, BOSH, have got a YouTube channel as well. And they just do quick, easy recipes that everyone knows about, and it's just the vegan versions of it. So that's the easiest place to start in terms of cooking.
So you were talking about on the allotment, a lot of traditional gardeners and even new gardeners don't garden with a no-kill policy or with the sort of vegan aspect of it in mind. How do you cope being alongside people who don't garden in that way?
Yeah, that's difficult. Fortunately, we've got a buffer zone next to us with an orchard, a community orchard, which I manage. So nothing comes from that side. On the other side, only half of it is used. And as far as we're aware at the moment, they don't use chemicals. So, I mean, I've heard stories of other organic gardeners on the allotment. They've got people who use herbicides next to them or insecticides, and sometimes you see a great big brown patch creeping on their side just from all the chemicals that's been used. It's quite scary.
I thought it was interesting. I was reading an interview with you actually from a while back, and you said something like I hate killing anything, even greenfly. And then you put a caveat on the end of it where you sort of distanced yourself a little bit from, I think, you know, you referred to it sort of a bit hippie or that kind of thing. I think now you've really become very brave and outspoken with your beliefs in that kind of aspect of things. How do you see that progressing for you personally in the world of horticulture? Do you think people will be less worried about speaking out?
Oh, I hope so. Since those last couple of talks, one for Hortus Loci and something I did for Pro Landscaper at Sandown, I've had people come back to me and say they want to learn more. I've had to send information to them. One wants to be an activist, another one is thinking about it. So I think there'll be a slow trickle to begin with, and eventually it will get faster and faster as people start becoming... You know, once it's seen as normal, once people start thinking, well, if he said it, then it should be okay. I mean, it's nice that you've come to talk to me about this, but I don't have the influence that some people in this world, you know, like the Monty Dons and the Alan Titchmarshes of this world, I don't have any sort of influence like that at all. But once you get someone like that, I mean, consider Lewis Hamilton, who's just started becoming an animal rights activist. He's got a following of 9 million people on his Instagram account. You can only dream of having that sort of influence. But once people like that do start becoming more vocal, then things will happen even faster. Because clearly he's not mad, you know, and that's the way it's going to go. It has to be slow to begin with, but eventually it will gather pace.
And I think some people see celebrities promoting it and think that it's a bit of a trend and that there are people cashing in on it.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any truth to that?
Yeah, there are some. I can't remember the names of them. I don't spend, you know, most of the time I spend on social media is stuff I'm putting out, so I don't really pay too much attention to other people, certainly not celebrities, but I've heard stories of some celebrities going vegan and then coming off being vegan, and they're just doing it for publicity, clearly. So that's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. We are humans after all, and you know, we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. Not even vegans are perfect by a long shot, but we do our best. Unfortunately, you do need celebrities, though. That's the way you get messages out, by capitalising on that. It's sad that we have to do that, but that's the way the world works.
There have been people on social media who have been coming at it from, I think, a very informed perspective, but saying that if you were to eat, say, grass-fed meat, that is better for the environment than a vegan diet. And it's better for farming and, you know, and what have you.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any truth in that?
There's certainly truth in the fact that the animals' welfare would be better. In terms of emissions, I think I've read conflicting reports about how it would affect emissions. But the one thing that's clear is that there isn't enough land on the earth to actually do that. Then it becomes an elitist thing. It's only that, you know, you're talking about high welfare meat is going to use a lot more land and is going to be a lot more expensive. You know, then it does become an elitist thing. It's like those who can afford that sort of meat can only have that sort of meat. So I've got a bit of a problem with that. I mean, what they're doing down at Knepp Farm is amazing. The rewilding project that's gone there shows how you can return the land to the wild and have all sorts of biodiversity. Has just been fantastic, the way it's come back to life. But the amount of land that we use for livestock in the country is enormous. You know, so you imagine making that, if it all went to rewilding, there just wouldn't be enough land, basically. So we consume far too much. So, you know, I'm like an abolitionist. I come from that sort of standpoint, so I'd rather see it just all wiped out completely. Even if people cut down on meat, that would have a massive effect. Yeah, a lot of people just think by cutting down can help, and it will, but I always think that better to get rid of it completely. And there are issues with that. You know, it's like, what happens to the land when that happens? But that's a really interesting question. I mean, there's people like Iain Tolhurst who have shown for the last 30 years he's been gardening without animal inputs. So it's a closed system. There's no animal fertilisers being used on his farm at the Hardwick estate. So he's got the template for how farming can be improved and how you can it can be sustainable without any animal fertilisers. And they're using agroforestry and wood chip and also green manures to maintain fertility. And he's showing that it can be done. So there's all sorts of interesting things coming up. And I think the more veganism comes to the fore, the more people are going to have to look to these alternative ways, because you can't just ask farmers to give up farming from tomorrow. There's going to be a transition phase. And in that transition phase, the government are going to have to try and help farmers in that transition so that their livelihoods can be maintained. So, veganism isn't against farmers. We need farmers on our side. And we need to learn new techniques and new methods of sustaining the world without having to eat animals. But Iain Tolhurst, if anyone really wants to know more about organic farming, Iain Tolhurst's work at the Hardwick estate is really worth looking into. And we've also got Matthew Appleby's book coming out soon, which will tell you a lot more about vegan gardening and the techniques involved. If people really want to know what goes on in farming, animal agriculture in this country in terms of welfare, they ought to go and look at a film documentary called Land of Hope and Glory. And you can just type landofhopeandglory.org and you'll see recent footage in the last 2 years of farming practices in this country and slaughter practices. So it's, a lot of people say, oh, well, it doesn't happen in this country because it's, it's only happening abroad. But it's really not true. This is standard practices. If you go onto that website and watch this free documentary online, you'll just see what happens. You can make your own judgment. So it's really, I suppose what we're trying to do is just put knowledge out there. You can only try and educate people. If they once they've seen it and make the decision, okay, yeah, we're happy to still fund this awful stuff for our taste buds, then at least you've tried. But, most people won't even watch it. And I don't think that's a very good way to approach things. I think you need to arm yourself with knowledge. Once you've got the knowledge, then you can make the decision. But don't dismiss veganism purely on conjecture and some imagination, this imaginary old McDonald's farm where all the cows, pigs, chickens, sheep, goats are treated really well. It doesn't matter how well they've been treated during their life. To have it cut short with a knife across the neck and strung upside down is just horrific. And unless you see it, you won't believe it.
That is the problem. There isn't that much information out there yet, and it's still a bit of a grey area.
Okay, here we are. How much of the world's land would we need in order to feed a global population with the average diet of a given country? And it says livestock takes up nearly 80% of global agricultural land, yet produces less than 20% of the world's supply of calories. The UN has just recently said that we need to move away from dairy and meat in order to cut emissions. So the impacts on climate change are enormous. So it's all been said, but no one wants to no one wants to believe it. I mean, it's a hard thing. If you've been brought up since childhood, being taught that it's all fine, everything's killed nicely, and you can just go about and you can eat as much meat as you like. You've been taught that since birth. It's very difficult to disbelieve it, and it's quite a big step. But the information's out there now. Back in the old days, we didn't have computers and you couldn't Google anything at the drop of a hat. So the truth is there. It's whether or not you want to see it. That's all.
Have you got any sources that are really good, objective sources of information with regard to, especially the farming aspect of it?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I've been looking at what the UN have been saying and the World Health Organization. Tell you one thing from the health point of view, a great resource from the health point of view is a guy called Dr. Michael Greger. He's independently funded. It's almost like a crowdfunding thing, so they're not biased in any way, either towards veganism or towards meat and dairy. He's done it purely from an independent point of view. So his findings on nutritionfacts.org are really good, really insightful. There is the film Cowspiracy, and there's loads of updates. If you go onto the Cowspiracy website, they update that as and when facts come in. A lot of the facts are disputed from the emissions point of view, but that's only one part of it, and they've got all their sources on there. Obviously, fossil fuels contribute massively to emissions as well. So there are some things disputed on that, but certainly in terms of pollution, ocean, dead zones, deforestation, 80% of deforestation is caused by animal agriculture. None of that's really disputed, and the pollution that goes is just causing so much trouble these days in the sea. All the water runoffs and nitrates coming from rivers. It just goes on and on and on. And one of the worst things is the species extinction as well in rainforests. We're killing some. I can't remember plant, insect and animal species, we're losing about 130 a day or something. It's like something like 2 acres of forested land are cleared every second, which is just mind-boggling. And all for animal agriculture. So we can save so much land, we can save so many species, save the biodiversity, we can save all the antibiotics that are going into these cattle. Most antibiotics, I think it's something like, I can't remember the exact statistics, but it's massive, goes towards keeping cattle alive rather than humans. So we're on the tip of a knife edge, really. I'm a cup half empty sort of guy. My partner, Christine, she's a cup half full person, so she's the only thing that keeps me positive at the moment. Because if you just talk to me, I'm all doom and gloom. So I should pack up now.
Yeah, that's it. Head for the news, Cliff. Can you remember any of those stats that you said at the Vegan Garden Festival about the amount of animals that are killed every day?
Well, I know 56 billion are killed every year. That's land animals. The number of sea animals number in the trillions, so they have to measure it by tons. It's just trillions and trillions. And, a lot of it is thrown away. I think, a fifth of it is thrown away because of, as bycatch. That includes whales and seals and dolphins and all the things that everyone loves. They're all killed at the same time just to catch fish. And by 2048, we're going to see fishless oceans in 2048. I'll be 90 by then. So, if the vegan lifestyle is as good to me as it's all purported to be, I could still be alive then to see fishless oceans, which is scary.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing, is it?
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. I went on a holiday to Greece a couple of years ago, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't see any fish. There was no fish anywhere. The only other time I went to the Mediterranean was when I was a boy, and it was teeming. Just in that short space of time, just fish are just disappearing. Same with the insects. Insects are disappearing. We've got our garden at home is normally covered in, if we open the window in the middle of the summer, there's normally moths galore coming in. Now, this last summer, barely a fly came into our house. It's just quite disturbing.
Yeah.
So gardeners can help. Gardeners can get this message across. There's nothing to be embarrassed about being vegan. It's the best thing you can do for the planet and for yourself and, of course, for the animals.
A very big thank you to Cleve for taking the time out of his busy schedule to take part in the interview, and also for being as open as he was. I admire him immensely for the passion and selflessness with which he stands up for animals and promotes veganism. If you've already read his book, Our Plot, and you've been hoping for a follow-up, you may have heard during our chat that Cleve alludes to a book he's writing at the moment. And the good news is that the book sounds as though it will contain more of Cleve's insight and honesty regarding what we can take from gardens and what we sometimes fail to put back, and how we as gardeners can make a difference to the environment and be at the vanguard of the vegan movement. The bad news is it's not due for release until late summer 2020, so if anyone's interested in starting a petition or pressure group to pester the publishers and or Cleve to release it sooner, I'd be up for that, so get in touch. I was talking about this interview with the kind and wise Louise, who featured in episode 5 on allotments. We were discussing the pros and cons of being forthright on your dietary choices. On the one hand, you can risk coming across as patronising or even a bit confrontational if you take the kind of hardline approach that involves continually voicing your beliefs publicly and sometimes foisting them on people who don't necessarily share them. On the other hand, if you do believe in something strongly and you don't flag up instances of behaviour that you believe are causing animal suffering or deaths and you don't agree with that, are you doing the animals and yourself a disservice and maybe even condoning it by not speaking up? It's a tough call and there is no right or wrong answer. You just have to live according to the values you hold dear and do what feels right for you, no one else. So in an effort to be true to myself, as I said, January will continue on the podcast next week when I'll be talking compost in general, but also which ones to choose if you want to avoid things like peat or animal-based products. So please join me for that if that's something you'd like to find out more about. And now on to the quiz and the treasure hunt results. And I'm very pleased to announce the winner of the quiz was Tim Howell, who turned out to be as good at answering questions as he is at setting them. Tim runs an annual horticulturally themed quiz on social media, which is always good fun. Tying for second place were Sarah Prescott, so well done Sarah, and Alan Boobmarsh. So congratulations to all the top scorers and thanks to everyone else who took part. If you'd like to see the answers, they are now on the website. And I made a slight error on question 15 where I misquoted Eric Robson of Gardener's Question Time. At the beginning of each programme, he says, "You'll be back to the garden in 45 minutes. And at the end of the show, he says, "Now back to the weeding." And I conflated the two catchphrases into "You'll be back to the weeding in 45 minutes. But I'm sure if you're familiar with the show, you got what I was asking. Actually, it's a catchphrase that's always annoyed me a bit because whenever I listen to Gardener's Question Time, I'm not sitting at my kitchen table with the wireless on in the background like it's 1956. I've got my earbuds in and I'm listening whilst gardening. So yeah, get with the times, Eric. People can listen and garden. And I know I misquoted Eric because I made myself listen to last week's episode of Gardener's Question Time. And I say made myself because for all of its wonderful advice, there's always a little bit of advice given that I think is misguided and sometimes it's even harmful. And this episode was no exception when the lovely Pippa Greenwood, who is usually full of fantastic advice, advised a listener to get rid of some chippings that have been the result of the stump grinding of a tree trunk in their garden. And there was no context given regards the size or the situation of the garden. If it was a 3 square metre paved affair, then fine. But in many gardens, you should be able to lose most of the chippings. I had a humongous oak stump ground out at home and I used the chippings as mulch, strewn thinly around the garden. And you probably know I'm all up for stashing stuff in the garden, and I think they could have been lost in numerous places. So they could have been bagged up and left to rot down. A few bucket loads could have been put on the compost heap or compost bin, a bit given to the neighbours to use as mulch, a bit chucked under a hedge. As I say, there has to be a better solution than getting rid of these chippings from the site. This should be avoided as far as possible, and this wasn't made clear on Gardener's Question Time. It wasn't even suggested how they should be got rid of. Would it involve a trip to the local tip in a car? Would you be burning them? So I thought that could have been handled better. And then there was a question on alliums, specifically why some don't come back year on year. And the panel gave their answers, and let's say they were pretty different to the advice given by Jackie Curry in episode 8 of the podcast, which I thought was interesting. If you want to hear what Jackie has to say on alliums, you can go back and listen to the episode. She's made some fascinating discoveries while she's been the holder of the National Collection of Alliums about how to grow them and how to get them to come back year on year. So if you don't want to take the Gardener's Question Time panel's word for it, I highly recommend checking out her work. So that is enough Gardener's Question Time bashing. Now on to the treasure hunt results. And there ended up being 6 treasure hunt entries in the final run-in, as I couldn't whittle them down to any fewer. 4 was the amount I originally intended to put forward to the public vote, so apologies for that. These final 6 were published on social media, and the people have spoken, and I'm pleased to announce the overall winner and recipient of the Fraser and Parsley Gardening Notebook is Sarah Prescott. So congratulations. And if you'd like to view her entry and the 5 other finalists, I've made a post about them on the Roots and All website. Just go to the blog tab and you'll see them. When I decided to run the treasure hunt, I thought it'd be a really good excuse for me and anyone taking part to get outdoors. And judging from the feedback I received, that's exactly what happened. And it seems people really enjoyed taking a bit of time out in nature and having an excuse to stop and really properly look at the things around them in the natural world. And I know it's become a bit of a cliche, but I've been really trying to put down my mobile phone and do more reading, more creative stuff, and spend more time with my own thoughts. And I think it's been really helpful for me over the past couple of weeks. So if you're looking for inspiration this new year, I can thoroughly recommend the phone down, mind open approach. So that's it for this episode, and it has been a long one, so thanks for listening and thanks for bearing with me and for all your continued support. It really means a lot, and it helps to remind me that I'm doing something worthwhile when I have the occasional down day, like we all have sometimes. So if you'd like to help me out and you don't want to or you can't contribute financially to the Patreon or the GoFundMe, I understand, but please could you help me by leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow me on social media and recommend the podcast to a friend. And don't forget to send me all your suggestions and ideas, because I'm going to redouble my efforts in 2019 to make this an excellent year for the podcast. And I hope it will be an excellent year for you too. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next Tuesday. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook Roots and All UK, and Instagram Roots and All Pod.